I think it was Dickens who said it was the best of times and the worst of times, but these days it seems like it's more the worst of times. It's been a rough couple of weeks in our nation and in our world. It seems like fear and anger and violence are just swirling and swirling around and around again. I'm getting to the point, I don't know about you, where I dread opening up the laptop and reading the news in the morning. African American men shot point blank. Police officers rifled down long distance. A nasty political climate. Terror attacks and coup attempts abroad. England is battening down the hatches, and we just heard this morning Sudanese on the very precipice of life itself because they don't have enough to eat. Global religious tensions. They're still running high. And even off the headlines, Afghanistan, our country continues to fight the longest war in U.S. history. Sometimes the world just seems toxic, poisonous. But guess what? I think there might be an antidote. What good is it, my brothers and sisters, if you say you have faith but do not have works? Can faith save you? If a brother or sister is naked and lacks daily food, and one of you says to them, "Go in peace, keep warm, and eat your fill," and yet you do not supply their bodily needs, what is the good of that? So faith by itself, if it has no works, is dead. But someone will say, "You have faith and I have works. Show me your faith without works, and I, by my works, will show you my faith." You believe that God is one. You do well. Even the demons believe and shudder. Do you want to be shown, you senseless person, that faith without works is barren? Wow, author of James getting a little chippy there. I love the passion, though. It's important. You know, Christianity has historically placed a strong emphasis on faith and belief. The faith that we are saved by God's grace and that we don't have to do anything to earn this grace and this love. That is indeed amazing grace. It's a beautiful concept when you stop and think about it. Even more beautiful when we can accept it. But at the same time, the writer of James wants us to see that we cannot claim to be people of faith unless we have works to go along with them. Because our faith compels us to perform good works. And if grace begins with God, then so do these good works. In other words, faith and works, they go hand in hand. Over the past week or so, 8 of us, 2 adults and 6 youth, put our faith into action as we traveled to our partner congregation in Cincinnati, Ohio, for what we called a senior high service adventure. This is a photo of one of the murals that's on the wall of that church in inner city Cincinnati. Throughout the week, we worked shoulder to shoulder with youth and adults and children from the Cincinnati Church of the Brethren, and we had an incredible adventure together. I also think we made a big difference in the world. So what I'd like to do this morning is I'd like to give you a little taste, that antidote I was talking about, a little taste of that trip using a phrase that we're all very familiar with: peace, service, and openness to all. I invite you to think about peace and service and openness as works of faith. That's where that works comes in, works of faith. Because as I saw in our time in Cincinnati, I realized that these are the kinds of works that are not only gospel living, they're the kinds of works that counteract all those poisonous toxins that are in our world. In other words, peace works, service works, openness works. First, peace works. The Cincinnati Church of the Brethren's mission and motto is peace in the city. based on Jeremiah 29, which says this: "Seek the peace and prosperity in the city to which I have carried you." Here they are around their peace bowl, some of their children. This congregation was one that many years ago moved from the comfort of the suburbs and chose the difficult assignment of living and working in the city because they felt called by God to bring peace to the city. When we got to Cincinnati this past week, we began with a tour of the immediate area around the church. Here we are. In 20 minutes, just 20 minutes walking, we went through one of the busiest illicit drug markets in the city. We went past high-rise condominiums with apartments that sell for millions of dollars. We saw children playing in the park. We saw condoms laying on the sidewalk. We saw a grocery store on its last legs. We saw piles of furniture and belongings mounded on the curbs from evictions. The neighborhood is an unbelievable mix of rich and poor, black and white, up and coming and down and out. In general, it is being revitalized and gentrified, which is good in many ways, but it also has the shadow side of raising the cost of living and displacing the poor, some of whom have lived there for decades, some families for generations. It's a mixed bag. Our main work project for our time was right across the street from the church. This is the First Step Home. It's the only residential drug recovery center that allows mothers and their children to stay together during the recovery process in the Cincinnati region. Ironically, it's also right across the street from the unseemly Fulton Manor Hotel, which sells rooms by the hour. It was a place where some of the women who are now in recovery across the street spent time making money to feed their drug habit. The church is literally right next door to the Fulton Manor Hotel and right across the street from the recovery center. As we worked, women would come and go to their meetings, and it was clear that they were doing the difficult and emotional work of recovery, and that it was a long and it was a hard road. The destructive and deadly effects of mostly heroin were very evident. In fact, just before we had arrived, one of their clients had relapsed, had overdosed, and was in the hospital on life support. She did, in fact, die while we were there, while she was in the hospital. Peace in the city. That's what they're about. How many of us would be ready to plant our church or our home right next to a seedy hotel and a recovery center? But here's the thing. We saw and heard firsthand how peace works. The peacemaking efforts of this congregation are making a difference, one neighbor, one recovering addict, one playground at a time, which brings us to service works. Our job was to give an extreme makeover to a children's play area, two children's play areas actually, that were overrun with weeds, in need of paint, cleaning, major improvement. In fact, a lot of love. These are the only two outdoor areas where the children have to play. And because this is a closed facility, the clients are not allowed to go off of this campus. So this is really the only outdoor area they had and have to live and work and play in and relax. We pulled weeds. We spread over 60 yards of mulch. We carried and tamped 5 tons of rock. My shoulders are still a little bit sore. We trimmed bushes and trees. We planned and installed a new walkway. We built a fence to block the ugly abandoned building that you can see a little bit of next door. And we painted it with flowers and fun. We're getting to those slides in a moment. Our goal was to create a place that is safe, that is loving, and that is beautiful, so that the clients can continue their difficult and important work of recovery. That's an after shot. There's our group. You can see some of the painting that was done on the fence in the background. In the front here are 2 of the Cincinnati youth, if you don't recognize them, Anna Walters and Isa. Here's a view from the other area where we mulched and we painted and cleaned and painted that entire playset. And here's our group. We worked side by side with our friends from Cincinnati. We learned a lot. We did some things that we've never done before. There's another one of the youth from Cincinnati, Nadia. Here's Pastor Ben. Taking a break. He was always sitting down. He wasn't always sitting down. That guy never sits down. That's when we were all done, where he sat down and had a drink. There's Olivia looking a little maniacal with the power tool. There's Troy. Power tools, I think, were one of the highlights for many. Here's the executive director of First Step when we first arrived, telling us a little bit about the importance that our work would have. And she shared her appreciation as well as what First Step Home was all about. It was a beautiful thing to be a part of. It was a beautiful thing to see. And we saw firsthand that service works. And so, this is an aside, but if you ever hear anybody start a sentence with, youth these days, they just don't grumble, 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 send them to me, because I have a lot of stories to tell them about youth who are loving, caring, hardworking, and committed. That was our group this week. We should all be very proud. In the end, this entire space, here's some before and afters, was reclaimed. There's a before, and there's an after. And there's our group again. Service works. Mothers and children oohed and awed. We felt very proud, but we also recognized that we are one drop in an ocean of love. Lastly, openness. Openness also works. Throughout the week, we had the opportunity to meet a lot of different kinds of people from a lot of different kinds of backgrounds and situations. We ate new and delicious foods. We were pushed out of our comfort zones at times, and we learned a lot. The last thing we did before leaving Cincinnati was to visit the Islamic Center of Greater Cincinnati and its mosque. Our excellent tour guide, Mrs. Shortir, told us about the basic tenets of Islam and gave us an opportunity to see our Muslim brothers and sisters in a way that is usually not portrayed in the media. We learned a lot. But here's the thing. On our way home, one of the best things about traveling with a group is that over time you have the hours to really have the conversations. There's nothing to get in your way. You can get really in depth. And as we were driving out of Cincinnati after we had just visited the mosque, we were talking about some of the questions that we still had. We had so many questions that were answered, but also one question led to 10 more. And so we started to talk. And then we started to talk about all of the differences between not only Christianity and Islam, but the different differences between other religions. And then we started to talk about some of the differences that the kids started to talk about, some of the differences that they have with some of their peers, and how beliefs differ. And I noticed that we were all doing a lot of talking about, I don't believe that, and I don't believe that, and I don't believe that. But then we started to shift the conversation, and so I posed to them the question, well, all right, if you don't believe all those other things, if your faith is not rooted in all those other things, where is your faith rooted? You know what they said? You've had a big hint throughout the service. Peace, service, and openness to all. The writer of James didn't say it quite this way, but works can not only show that we have faith, works can be a path to faith. And faith and works are that antidote. I think it's just what the world needs now. It will cure not only us, but it has the power to cure worldwide. Now, I know that I've only shared one story of one little group during 1 week in this congregation. As you all know, there are many, many more stories of peace and service and openness lived out every single day around here and beyond. Our Congolese family is settling in. Food bank shelves are stocked. Volunteer hours are amassed. This building serves hundreds of people, families, every single week. And we are hiring a fourth minister to keep reaching out to our community to share this mission and this message of peace and service and openness. Why? Because it works. So, if you've ever wondered if all this talking and all this doing about peace and service and openness is making a difference, if it works, then remember this one thing, that for at least one fantastic group of young people, it has become the cornerstone of their faith and the best thing about being part of this congregation.